So as I mentioned earlier, two of my functions are theme and speakers. When I was looking to line up speakers tied into this conference theme, the first area I thought of was kind of my day job stuff. For the last 15 years, I've served as Chief Government Affairs Officer for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital in Memphis. And so really have the privilege to work with men and women who hold elected office at the state, at the federal level, and all of the administrative and support folks that they work with. So I've worked with a lot of elected officials and public servants over those 15 years, and I'm also a student of history. So I've read a biography of every U.S. president through Gerald Ford. Now I'm taking a break now, and I'm reading The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. And as soon as I finish that, I'll pick up with Jimmy Carter. But in the years I've spent, again, working with public servants, one of the ones that I've just really held in the most high esteem and respect is our speaker tonight. I got to know him during his 12 years serving Tennessee in the U.S. Senate. Worked with his staff mostly, but whenever St. Jude needed something and we called on Bob Corker, he was always there for us. And multitudes of people across the state could say the same thing for him. So I came to know Bob Corker, was firm in his political beliefs, but he's even firmer in putting service to his city, his state, and his country above political advancement. And he's firm in his value of treating other people the way he would like to be treated. Please welcome to the stage Bob Corker. Bob, we're going to sit right over here.
No, he's fine.
No, he's not. Nobody can answer.
In 1995, you accepted the call as Commissioner of Finance and Administration from a good governor from West Tennessee, Don Sundquist, and served the state. You then ran for mayor successfully, was elected, and then in 2006 ran for the U.S. Senate. I remember that campaign, Senator. You were running against Harold Ford Jr. of Memphis, Congressman. That was a very close race. I got to know you on the campaign trail and your staff. So, and then you made the commitment that you were going to serve 2 terms and then leave public office, and you kept your word. So, with that, is there anything else I've left out that you'd like to share? Your lovely wife, you've got 2 daughters.
That's plenty. Thank you so much. Yes, sir.
So, let's kind of dive in then to you. Let's talk about, and I didn't even realize Bob was an Episcopalian until tonight. So, what a stroke of luck. He's not a cradled Episcopalian, is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, so how did you get into the Episcopal Church?
So, I grew up a Methodist all my life, and and was very involved at a young age. And when I actually ran for the Senate in 1994, in a primary where Bill Frist ended up being the victor, and he ran a better race and was a better candidate and deserved to win. And I was asked to be Commissioner of Finance after that, because when you're running for office, you're all at the same place. I mean, and at that year, there were 2 Senate races underway. By the way, I'm digressing. I know Fred Thompson was running because Al Gore had become vice president. So it was an unusual year, and we all were everywhere at the same place at the same time. So Governor Sundquist, actually, I was his second choice as Commissioner of Finance. He wanted... is there a guy named Ron Terry from West Tennessee, and Ron had just married a new, young, lovely wife, and she wanted him in Aspen, not in the state of Tennessee, so he gave a long no instead of a quick yes, and so he was in a bind, and he called me, and so we moved to Nashville, and when we did so, my wife had always wanted to be an Episcopalian, and so we became one, attended Christ Church. I know there's numbers of people here from Christ Church, and the same in Chattanooga.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I just didn't realize that background. So what role would you say your faith played in your professional career, stepwise?
So a big, when I was a construction superintendent for 4 years when I graduated from the University of Tennessee, and I went in business in Chattanooga with $8,000, and I built a company that grew at 90% a year for 9.5 years, and then I sold it after 12, and I loved every second of it, but during that period of time, especially when I was about 28 or so, I really began just an in-depth study of the Bible. I went through a 2-year course called Bethel Series, which happens at the Methodist Church a lot. I then taught it, and I read one day in the church bulletin they were looking for someone to lead a mission trip to Haiti that knew something about construction, and I volunteered to do so. I went to Haiti. It was the most moving experience of my life to be around people in need, and all of you have experienced this, I know, where you think you're going down to benefit someone else, but you're the beneficiary. And so, anyway, I couldn't be going around the country doing mission trips with a company that was working in 18 states and growing at 80% a year. So I began working in the inner city. And there were two verses, if you will, through this intensive study that had the most effect on me, and we'd probably get in a theological debate if I'll just tell you what they were. The first was Genesis 12, where God said to the Jewish people that, paraphrasing, that they were blessed to be a blessing. And there's just something about that hit me. I felt like the most, and I still do today, the most blessed person in the world, and I felt like I had an obligation. And then the second, and this is where the real debate would take place, James 4, faith without works is dead, and to me to use the minor talents that I had to an end that made a difference drove me really, and it really wasn't as grace-oriented as life is today. It was really more about the fact that I needed to use my skills to help other people in ways that didn't have anything to do with making money. And so I started working down in the inner city of Chattanooga with a bunch of white guys who went to the Presbyterian church, and I began to see that mostly in an African-American inner city area that we had so many people living in extreme poverty. And so I searched. I went down to Habitat for Humanity and Americus and met Millard Fuller. I then met some other people and ended up leading something in our community called Chattanooga Neighborhood Enterprise, whose mission was to provide the opportunity for all Chattanoogans to have decent, fit, and affordable housing. And very quickly, about 10,000 citizens, believe it or not, were affected by that. It was a great community effort and so touching for me to be a part of. A Democratic governor running for governor, Ned McWhorter, y'all remember him. I'm a Republican. I think some of you know that. And so but I never really, nobody knew what I was. I just was a civic person and a business person. And so he came through the state, and somebody brought him over to what we were doing and showed him. He asked me to serve after he was elected, he asked me to serve on a task force at the state, and I began to see the difference that, you can make in people's lives in the public arena. I then served on a board, and the next thing you know, I ended up being in the public arena. But it was no doubt that those intense biblical study that began the foundation, then it was the mission trip that just touched me unbelievably, and then sort of fueled me, if you will, with that fire to try to do something other than being in the profit-making business all my life. Now, I do love that too, and I'm back doing some of that now, but no doubt, the Methodist Church and the things that I went through, the faith that was grown through that really is what caused me to enter the public arena.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I also recently read a book by former Governor Bill Haslam, a friend of yours, Faithful Presence, The Promise and Perils of Faith in the Public Square. In this book, he describes a bike ride with you, I believe, in Florida on spring break, and he said you really helped shape his decision to run for the mayor of Knoxville at that time. So, I was going to ask, did you have, a similar inspiration? But I think you've already answered that question. I mean, obviously, you're going down and participating in service above self, to use a good Rotary phrase, led you really to pursue public service. And but specifically for the U.S. Senate, was there? Did you have somebody who, came to you and said, hey, Bob, we really need you in the Senate?
So when I ran for mayor, I had I sold my first company in 1990, and when I finished being Commissioner of Finance for our state, which I met a number of you through that experience, and I just loved that experience. It was for a business person to be Chief Operating Officer of the state and run the state and not have to deal with much anyway of politics. It was just the greatest role ever. And so when I finished that, I ended up pursuing business again. I bought a couple of companies in Chattanooga, which were really neat, old companies, and merged them together. And people began talking to me about running for mayor. I did it. It was a civic job. And it wasn't a political job. I never thought I would ever run for public office again. I just was back in my community. I'd run for the Senate and lost. I was Commissioner of Finance, and I did this. The mayor's job, by the way, was by far the most rewarding public service of my entire life. There's nothing like being the mayor of a city to be the civic leader, a business leader, a political leader, and Phoebe, I would never put myself in your place, but believe it or not, you're a spiritual leader. I mean, you're touching people where they are. You're touching convicted felons, and you're touching people who are down and out, and it's just an amazing place to touch people. And again, the most rewarding 4 years of my entire life, really. So when that was ending, Bill Frist had also said he was going to run for 2 terms. If you remember, he was Majority Leader of the United States Senate, pretty big position to step down from. And so he just, and by the way, he beat me in a race that was really tough, okay? Hopefully y'all don't remember it. But it was he had a really good campaign manager and tough campaign manager, and it was a bloody race. And when it was over, I sat on the porch with my wife till about 4 o'clock in the morning, and got up the next morning and drove to Nashville and asked, hey, what can I do to help? And so that cemented, sort of a longer-term friendship. He became became the leader in the Senate on health care issues because he'd been a physician, and I was leading all the state's health care initiatives, and so we worked very closely together. Long story short, and I'm going to stand up if you don't care. I can still look you in the eye. But he came and just recruited the heck out of me. He was relentless. Every 3 weeks he'd be showing up. He took me up in the mountains with his security detail to a place with no power. Lamar did the same thing. And I felt like that our state has been run well, let's face it. I mean, through the years, except for a couple of blips, we've got a great state. Somehow or another, I felt my negotiating skills would be useful in the United States Senate. I was pretty naive. But I just felt like the country was in a place that and Bill Haslam would tell you that he had the best job in the world being governor, right?
Yeah.
And it's like on steroids being mayor, you're touching people all across the state in a real way. And there were a lot of times when I would look at Bill and I felt like I had a whole lot to do with him even being in the public arena. I don't think he would have even considered it if it hadn't been for that bike ride. So I'd look at him sometimes and go, "Guy, he got the best end of this deal." But now that it's over, I'm so glad that I had the privilege of meeting so many of you and serving in that capacity during a difficult time in our country. And I did it because I was recruited, and I'm glad I did it.
So I want to go back to 2006. So you'd run a very, as you said, close race in the 90s, lost, won a very close race in 2006. Must have just been a huge sense of relief once that campaign was over. Once you got in as Senator Bob Corker and however long it took you to kind of get settled in, what would you say is one or two of your biggest kind of aha moments about, wow, I didn't realize this was going to be like this?
Well, for about 6 weeks, I did wonder why I had run for the United States Senate. It just, you get up there, it's just a zillion things. It's not an executive job, as everyone knows, and I knew that prior to doing it. But after about 6 weeks, my staff was literally setting up 27 to 28 meetings a day, and what was happening was, there was nothing of substance happening, so I called time out and said, "Hey, look, I came up here to make a difference. I didn't come up here to glad hand a bunch of people coming through the office and not make a difference." So I said, "Look, what we're going to do is we're going to master a few things, and we're going to be because in the Senate today, you can make an outsized difference. It used to be that if you didn't have seniority, you couldn't, but today it's a little different, and I really focused on a few issues, and then we had the financial crisis, and I played an outsized role there. So the aha moment, though, was to say, hey, look, spend your time being the smartest person in the United States Senate on this particular topic, and at some point in time, you're going to be able to the occasion, and you will meet, and you'll be able to make an outsized difference. And for all the new senators coming in, that's what I told them to do. Please don't just go, do superficial things. Focus, and if you focus, the time will arise when you'll make a difference in the country, and that's what we live for, right?
Yeah. So fast forward 12 years, you do decide to step down, and the thing I'm probably even more curious about is, for the last 2 years, again, as you've gotten out of the public service arena, what has been did you have any withdrawal? Was it like, boy, I really miss being in D.C. and being at the center of that?
So I had this meeting a year before I left. I'd announced that I was leaving. And I had friends on both sides of the aisle actually running for my seat, people that I knew very well. And I'm going to say this and sound somewhat immodest, even mentioning these names, but I'd just come back from Afghanistan, and it was on a Friday, and I was invited to a dinner that night with Warren Buffett, Jeffrey Bezos, Jamie Dimon, Kevin McCarthy, Colin Powell, myself, and someone who ran a defense company. And it was a pretty heady dinner, and I had called on those people for advice through the years, and they were so nice to always take my call. And
right.
Jeffrey was a little new, Jeffrey Bezos, he was kind of new to the scene. But Buffett looked at me, and long story short, I don't want to belabor it, he looked at me and said, you know, you have to run again, because, and he explained that his dad had served for 6 years in Congress. I did not know that. And when he got beat after 6 years, and he said he lived for many, many years, but he died as a human being the day he walked out of Congress. Had no energy, no passion. Well, he scared the living daylights out of me. You know, if Jerry Askew had told me that, I wouldn't have thought about it. But you know, so it really did haunt me. And I walked off the Senate floor at noon on January the 3rd, a year later. And while it was the greatest privilege of my life, the most meaningful was being mayor of a city. The greatest privilege was serving in the United States Senate and being chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee. And I want people to run. It's a great privilege to do that, but I have not missed it 1 second. And it's not because of the job. I think it's because I had other things in life that I had done and knew how to do and was able to transition. But don't get me wrong. Life after is a perfect, you know, for my chapter right now, and you know, I haven't yet figured everything out. I'm as happy as I've ever been. My wife is the happiest she has ever been, but you know, I want to figure out what that next calling is. I love business. I love building companies. I'm involved in 3 in an in-depth way as chairman. But I'm going to find that thing that's that next thing. I don't know what it is yet, but where I can apply. Think about the waste of being all over the world representing our country and all the things that you learn doing that and all the things you learn just about policy and people all around the country. And somehow or another I want to figure out that next way to utilize that in a way that matters. Right. Otherwise, I think I'll feel a sense of irresponsibility in life if that doesn't happen.
Wow.
So.
That's fantastic to hear, because you, as you said, someone with talents, we don't want to waste that, and we can't wait to see what your next chapter holds for you. We're going to open up for Q&A. We've got microphones out here, but there's one. I'm going to start it off with my own question. You mentioned Afghanistan. I can't let you leave here as a former chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. What is your take on what's life after for Afghanistan now, after U.S. military has left?
Yeah. So, you know, one of my failings as a political person is I'm just never good at taking shots at the other side. And just wasn't. So, you know, I look at what's happened, and it was so unnecessary. And to me, so heartbreaking. I was in Afghanistan many, many times, and you know, whenever I was there, you know, part of the deal is they want Congress to fund the military there, right? So the Afghan military, and so, you know, without a doubt, I was always there watching maneuvers for a little while. I never in my life ever believed that the Afghan military could ever defend the country. I just didn't see it in their eyes. I didn't see it in the passion. I mean, they were collecting a paycheck. By the way, there's about 385,000 of them with all kinds of arms, I think you know. So to me, I watched what was happening, and by the way, this has been a policy that's been carried out by a Republican administration and now a Democratic administration towards the same end. When they gave the Bagram base away, it broke my heart. I mean, you guys, I don't know if any of y'all have been there, but it is a massive facility worth billions of dollars. It would have been a place for us to also deal with the federally administered tribal areas of Pakistan, where we have so many extremists. It would have been a great place to be close there. And, you know, we had 2,500 troops. We hadn't had a loss in a year. 16 months we hadn't lost a soldier. So I just, I was surprised when the statement was made by our president that he had full faith that the Afghan military could, I thought, well, something's happened in the last 2 years since I've been gone. And you know, I know the American people are over it, and I understand all that, I do. And look, I was there in 2007 when I saw resources leaving Afghanistan, going to Iraq, and depleting our effort there. So there's been mistakes made through 4 presidencies, but it's just what happened here at the end was just so, I'm talking about this last 10 days was just totally unnecessary, and I hurt for the people who are stranded there. I hurt for the women. I was in Iraq in 2009 observing the elections, and at 4:30 in the morning, the women in Afghanistan, who have the toughest life of anybody in the world, they were wrapped around blocks and blocks to vote at 4:30 in the morning because they had to be back by 6 to care for their families, to cook for the meals, to do all the stuff they do during the day. And then I met, you know, women who were going to the university and becoming part of civil society there, and then they were part of parliament, and I just, you know, the Taliban certainly has put out a lot of good public relations over the last 72 hours, you know, 4 days, saying that they're different, they've learned. I sure hope so. I don't think that's probably the case, but I hope that's the case. But there's just so much damage. And then lastly, I don't watch television. My staff sent me a clip the other day because they know I don't watch television. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. But they sent me a clip of an interview of a person in Afghanistan trying to get out, and I literally choked up.
Yeah.
Just having been there and having dealt with the people of Afghanistan, not the warlords. I dealt with them too. But I look at now that just and again, this is not a partisan comment, it is a stain on our country. I mean, I'm reading what other leaders around the world are saying about us today, and their people are stuck there too, right? So I just hope I hope somehow or another we get our people out, we get our translators out. A guy who's running one of my companies did five tours in Afghanistan. He went on to do great things in business, but his interpreter from Afghanistan, Wahid, is a friend of mine. He lives with him, and you know, he was just distraught over his parents lived catty-corner to the prison in Iraq, where all the prisoners, these are former Al-Qaeda members, and were let out. So, I mean, it'd be like from here to that van, the doors of the prison open up. So, you know, we're not, the human effect of what is happening there, to me, is disastrous. And somehow or another, I hope we get through this in a way that doesn't, where too many people aren't harmed, aren't beheaded, aren't, other things happening to women, and somehow or another our country and its standing in the world is not too damaged.
Yeah.
But we're highly damaged right now. And I want to say one more time, both a Republican administration and a Democratic administration were heading towards this end. I disagreed with it, but they were both heading towards this end. But this chaotic ending is really disastrous.
Could have been avoided. Okay, let's open up the floor for a couple of questions for Bob Corker. As I said, we've got microphones out here. Just raise your hand and.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to need 2 volunteers who are going to control the microphones. Could I have someone from this side, someone from this side, come over here? Okay?
I know this is going to be a good question. Oh, I thought he was a questioner.
There are instructions, and there's a good way and a bad way to do it.
Yeah, I see.
I learned this afternoon with
Yeah.
Bishop Keith. Just put it behind you.
Okay.
And hold up your hands if you have a question.
Over there.
Yes, sir.
You know, forgive an economic question at a religious meeting, but does the national debt matter anymore? Is this, I mean, are interest rates going to stay 1.5 forever? Or are we eventually going to have to pay this money back
Yeah.
at a higher level? And I won't live long enough to pay it back.
Yeah.
My kids may, and my grandkids may. Do you have an opinion?
Yeah, I was very involved in the financial crisis that took place in '08 as far as trying to solve it, and then laid out the framework in which GM was dealt with towards solvency. And when that was over, I really thought that our nation would resolve this financial crisis where literally on Friday we didn't think money was going to come out of the ATM machine, and Democrats and Republicans voted for something that no one wanted to vote for. Democrats didn't want to vote for anything that had to do with helping banks, and Republicans didn't want to vote for anything that was messing up the free enterprise or interfering with the free enterprise. So it was a terrible vote. And I think, by the way, it has led, I think that was the genesis of where we are today. I think it led to the Tea Party and then populism, and we see that in both sides of the aisle, which leads me to the other. In about 2013, I really felt like we were going to solve this problem, just like we did the financial crisis. And President Obama, to his credit, was actually showing a little bit of leg as it relates to reforming some of the entitlement programs, which is like, the third rail in politics, especially for them. And that moment kind of came and went. We didn't deal with it. It didn't happen. And by 2017, with a new president coming in on the Republican side that let's face it, had no thoughts whatsoever about debt, actually had built his career on debt. And Republicans lost any degree of fiscal conservatism. And you know what, really, you think about the filibuster and everybody debates it. It takes 60 votes to pass anything. Let me tell you the effect that it has on appropriations. So since you have to have 60 votes to pass anything, what happens? Both sides of the aisle get everything they want. Both sides of the aisle. So the Republican appropriators are telling the Democratic appropriators, hey, don't y'all agree to this, and vice versa. And so, we just keep running up spending. Of course, that's only about 35% of the money we spend. The rest of it is all in entitlements. I think y'all are aware of that. But no, people just, I was just out at the Aspen Economics Strategy Group that's run by Hank Paulson, a Republican Treasury Secretary, and Erskine Bowles, who was Chief of Staff to Bill Clinton. We've got, a bunch of former Fed chairmen and former Treasury secretaries, and I mean, the fact is that nobody cares about debt anymore, and at some point, we're going to get to a point where it's more than we can handle. And who's going to be harmed the most? The people at the lowest end of the totem pole will be the people that will be harmed the most when that happens. But there's just no political will right now, and therefore we're not dealing with it.
Yeah, Senator Corker, I was just curious about your inclinations for the future. If there's something that leads you at this point in time towards the private sector to try and find those things that you want to do next, or is it in the public sector, or is there some way to discern that at this time?
Yeah, I'm not dodging it. I didn't even take my check when I was in the Senate. It went to the Community Foundation of Chattanooga, and I fortunately had a good foundation before I went there, but I came back just wanting to express myself a little bit back in the private sector, and I spent some time getting that foundation in place in a way that isn't consuming. I'm chairman of these companies. I'm not CEO. And so I help set the vision and help funding, but I'm not the operator. And so I've got time now. And I've looked at numbers of things. I've looked at the issues we have in our community with education, especially in the inner city, in the urban core. I've looked at, I was the sort of the United States leader kind of around the world as it relates to human trafficking. And so, I've thought some about that, and I've met with people on all of these things. You've got to have a sustained passion for something, right? I know you've got it in doing what you're doing and what you're doing, and so I don't know what it is yet. The public arena, both sides of the aisle are just, I don't know. I have difficulty giving a stump talk, right? So I don't know. We'll see. It's not something that today is there. And I'm 68 years old and try to take care of myself. You never know what happens in life health-wise, but I want to try to make sure that whatever it is something that I can sustain the passion for and know that it's the right thing.
Got a question over here.
Senator, we have a question from the right.
It doesn't know me that well. Ken Love, St. Anne's, Nashville. My friends who have built companies and built businesses have expressed that being driven to make those businesses succeed day after day,
right.
Year after year. And I know from the political arena is a similar full-on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week kind of environment. And so I think, as an outsider, it looks like your work life has been one long adrenaline rush. Long adrenaline rush.
It has.
And so
I've never had a day of work in my life, not
Right.
one day.
it's a good thing that you've been involved in things that you love.
Yeah.
How do you make the transition to a different sort of service?
Yeah.
How do you quiet yourself so that so that you're directing your energy outward and not into yourself?
Yeah. That is a great question, and I think a theme that y'all will wrestle with down here at the campfire tonight. For me, I go through most every day a little bit of a ritual of quietness and blessings to people that I know, and then to my family, and it helps quiet me, and I ask for guidance. But it's hard because I have had that life. I mean, you're talking about building a company that operated in 18 states and starting with $8,000. I mean, it was just so much fun. And then buying the companies that I bought in Chattanooga. When I walked away from the closing table, I told the people who sold them to me that I'd give it back to them if they let me try to buy them again, right? I mean, so much. I mean, it was just so much fun. And then, the Senate wasn't, just honestly, while it's a great privilege, it wasn't always an adrenaline flow. I mean, after the financial crisis and then Dodd-Frank passed, it was like watching paint dry for a while. So but they're stimulating people, right? So, and then I'm back in business, and now I've got a little adrenaline going. But quieting, and, I've listened to, y'all ever listen to Richard Rohr? The second half of life, am I strong enough as a human being? Am I strong enough to not be seduced by the adrenaline, seduced by the production, right? Which is what I've done all my life, is produce. And one of the things that I didn't like so much about the Senate, just to be honest, is you don't really feel like you're producing, right? But I haven't figured that out yet. That's why your title is good. But I understand I've got there's two paths in front of me, and each of you probably has this same decision. There's the path of really trying to be like the title of that book and what it's about, and that second half is 100% about everyone else, right? That everyone else is your focus. Or is it, is there some mountain to climb again that could have benefit to mankind, but it's a different kind of thing because you're leading an effort of trying to solve something that's happening in the world. And I have not figured out yet whether I'm capable of that grace, if you will. For those of y'all who've read the book, it's incredible. I don't know if I'm capable of that. I'm just being honest with you, and I'm sure y'all will say honest things to each other tonight. Or whether my DNA, and I tell my daughters, you are who you are, and you need to use your gifts. And maybe my gifts are more oriented that way, and maybe that's the direction. So I haven't fully discerned, but I ask at least 6 out of every 7 days, and usually 7.
We got time for one more question for Bob Corker.
First of all, don't take any particular attention that I'm sitting on the left side. This is by happenstance. Anyway, Senator, I just want to thank you for your service and what you've done for this country, and I really appreciate that. My question is, I'm a little older, I'm back to Vietnam era kind of thing, but I served the American Embassy in Tehran in 65, 66, 67, and learned a lot about that culture and other Islamic cultures. And I'm wondering what your thought might be to help Congress and the Senate come to realization in what we've seen, and maybe naivete out of Iran, was that continually they rattle their sword, we give them money, and things settle down, they rattle their sword, and we do it over and over again.
Yeah.
But looking at Congress and the things that you said about looking at the Afghanis military, knowing that they were not up to speed to do that they were getting a paycheck, do you see any hope there? What can we do to facilitate that other than hitting the ballot box?
Now, I had a little bit of difficulty hearing, but I think you were talking about the situation in Iran. Is that correct?
And our situation in Afghanistan today.
Well, I mean, it would appear to me that in Afghanistan, we've lost all of our leverage. I mean, I hate to say it, but it's over. I mean, if our goal should be to get folks out, but when we gave up the Bagram base and we sent our troops home and we made a deal with the Taliban that we were going to be out of there by August 31 regardless, I mean, there's no putting the genie back in the bottle there. Now, maybe there'll be issues that will arise, but I hate to sound like a fatalist, but I don't see a step forward today. There was plenty of steps forward 30 days ago. Plenty. All kinds of options, none of which were fun, but would not have led to where we are today. Today, now that we've done what we've done, there's almost no option unless there's some catastrophe, which then brings us back in with troops in a very different way than where we were. All we were doing before is providing intelligence and providing air support. And the fact that they knew we did that is what gave them the strength to move ahead and do the things they did on the ground. So I think that chapter's closed. It's not like Iraq, where when ISIS began to take over, when we tried this in Iraq, back in 2013 or whenever it was, there was still a country in Iraq. There was still a government there, and so we were able to go in there and fix, if you will, all the things that were going on. It's still not a great country, but it's certainly much better than where we are in Afghanistan. With Iran, look, I never thought the Iran deal was good because it had a 10-year sunset provision. By the way, that's 4 years from right now. And we allowed them to continue. They were using IR1 centrifuges, and we allowed them to do research and development on IR2s, IR4s, IR6s, IR8s, and in a room that's maybe twice the size of this stage with IR8 centrifuges, you can produce a lot of high-grade enriched uranium. So I just thought it was not a sensible deal. I hope we will not enter into a deal of that framework, and my guess is that with what has happened, especially with them electing someone who's in the making of Khamenei now, I don't think there'll be a deal done like we did before. Obviously, we can't let them get a nuclear weapon, but I don't think that deal was the ticket to keep that from happening.
Yes, sir.
And I know there's a lot of disagreement over that.
Senator? My thought is, how do we get Congress and the Senate to realize, like you did, when you look in the eyes of the Afghan army, that they're not going to stand up and do it? I mean, this is not just Afghanistan. This is all these other countries are tribal, and they have their mindset on what they're going to do. And it seems that what they do is rattle their swords, and we give them money. And when that money runs out, they do it again.
Yeah.
So how do we, other than the ballot box?
I think we've made, let's face it, from the 60s to now, well, first of all, if I could, and this is why church, prayer, look, there are no wise men. You know, everybody's doing the best they can. It's not like somebody is, you know, somebody, you're just given this gift of knowing everything there is to know in the world, and all your decisions are going to be made in a good way. They're just people, ordinary people rise to occasions sometimes during extraordinary times. But typically, there may be a lot of smart people, a lot of people who are leaders, a lot of people who have been successful in many fields, but you're just no one who has a clairvoyant thought about what ought to happen. And then you have the pressure, you have the fog of war, not just on the battlefield, but the fog of war just politically and everything that's happening. And you can't imagine the incoming that's taking place during that time. And so we, as a country, through many, many presidents on both sides of the aisle, have made a lot of really bad decisions since the 1960s. And my guess is that, especially with what we're seeing happen right now, the American people and our leadership is going to be very, very reticent to think that somehow or another we can go into another country with totally different values and nation build. And I know that, you know, people have said that Afghanistan was never about nation building. Believe me, it was about nation building. I watched it every time I was there. Our mission got bungled up, and we're paying the price for it now. But I think we've learned a lesson for at least a generation. And hopefully there'll be smart people around that can refresh people's memories about what is accomplishable and what is not. And our big threat today, and I don't even want to use it as a threat, the China situation is so much different than all of these. And I think we as a country need to deal with China as if we can coexist. Now, I may get some tomatoes thrown at me, but the best way to coexist with China and try to keep there from being a real war, not the kind we've been having, but a real war, is for us to do everything we possibly can to make our country great. And if we make our country great, we don't have this worry. We can coexist. And by the way, if they decide to take another bent and they want to have dominion over us, we still would have done the right thing, right? By making our country as great as we can make it. So I know what worries me right now is the rhetoric coming out of Washington as it relates to China, because you know the best way to get elected in this world with all the polarity is you're the toughest on a particular issue, especially when it's the hot issue. And I just, you may think I'm naive. I met with my counterpart many times from China. They've always thought they were superior to us. They always thought their model was better than ours. Ours was antiquated. We were going to fail. And so when the man said it to our State Department up in Alaska, everybody was shocked. They've been telling me that for years. But the way we counter that is not to worry so much about what they're doing, but let's stick to our business. Let's make ourselves great. Let's make our schools fantastic. Let's make everything about, let's deal with our debt. Let's make our country strong, and we'll have less to worry about as it relates to China. I'm sorry, I know I went over.
Thank you,
anyway.
Bob Corker. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Yeah.